The 1970s might just be the most feared decade any single franchise ever built in NFL history, and for a whole stack of different reasons. A 43-year-old kicker who won 5 straight games almost by himself. A quarterback who fumbled the ball on purpose to steal a victory. A safety whose hit on one play changed the sport forever. A wide receiver who won a Super Bowl MVP trophy with just 4 catches. A coach who spent 10 seasons on the sideline and never once finished with a losing record. And an owner whose entire philosophy could be boiled down to 2 words: just win. This is the story of the Oakland Raiders, the team that spent the better part of 10 years being the most dangerous operation in professional football, whether they were hoisting the trophy or walking off the field 1 game short of it. Along the way, there were controversial finishes, 4 separate championship game heartbreaks, one of the most talked about single plays in NFL history, and a Hall of Fame roster stacked 11 players deep. This is the full recap of the Oakland Raiders 1970s, from the AFL-NFL merger in 1970 to the final whistle of the decade in 1979. When the 70s began, the Raiders were already one of the most respected young franchises in professional football. Al Davis had joined the organization as head coach back in 1963 and turned a struggling team around almost overnight, then briefly left to serve as commissioner of the entire American Football League in 1966, before returning to Oakland that same year as part owner and de facto general manager. By 1970, the Raiders had built a reputation across the old AFL as one of its most consistently dangerous rosters, appearing in the league's championship game as recently as 1969 and playing in the second-ever Super Bowl 2 seasons before that. That year, the AFL officially folded into the NFL as part of the merger, and the Raiders were placed in the newly created American Football Conference under 32-year-old head coach John Madden, who had taken over the sideline in 1969. Nobody realized it at the time, but Madden was about to begin one of the most successful coaching tenures the league has ever seen, one that would end a decade later without a single losing season on his ledger. Davis, meanwhile, would become the Raiders' full-time principal owner in 1972, a position he'd hold for the next 39 years, building the franchise around a simple, relentless mission statement that became as famous as the team itself: just win, baby. The Raiders' first season in the merged NFL will always be remembered for one man, 43-year-old George Blanda. Blanda had actually been released by Oakland during the preseason before fighting his way back onto the roster as a backup quarterback and place kicker. Starting on October 25th, with starter Daryl LaMonica sidelined by injury, Blanda came off the bench and threw 3 touchdown passes to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 31-14. The very next week, his 48-yard field goal with 3 seconds left rescued a 17-17 tie against the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. 7 days after that, Blanda again relieved LaMonica, throwing a tying touchdown pass late against the Cleveland Browns before booting a 52-yard field goal as time expired for a 23-20 win. He did it again the following week, hitting Fred Biletnikoff for the go-ahead score with under 3 minutes left to beat the Denver Broncos 24-19, and he closed out the run with a 16-yard last-second field goal to defeat the San Diego Chargers 20-17. In 5 consecutive weeks, at an age when most players had already retired, Blanda had personally authored 4 wins and a tie for a team that went a mediocre 4-4-1 in every other game that season. He was named the Associated Press Male Athlete of the Year, the first time that award had ever gone to a professional football player, and he was named the AFC's Player of the Year. The Raiders finished 8-4-2, won the AFC West, and beat the Miami Dolphins 21-14 in the divisional round of the playoffs. That set up a trip to Baltimore for the AFC Championship Game, where Blanda once again relieved an injured LaMonica and nearly pulled off one more miracle, completing 17 of 32 passes for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also adding a 48-yard field goal. But the magic finally ran out late, and Blanda threw 2 fourth-quarter interceptions as Oakland fell to the Colts 27-17. At 43 years old, Blanda had become the oldest quarterback ever to appear in a professional football championship game, a record that stands to this day. Even in defeat, that Raiders roster was loaded with future Hall of Famers. Fred Biletnikoff, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, cornerback Willie Brown, and center Jim Otto all made the Pro Bowl that season, with Brown also earning All-Pro honors. The following year brought no George Blanda miracles, at least not enough of them. Oakland used the first round of the 1971 draft to select Ohio State safety Jack Tatum, a devastating open-field hitter who would go on to become one of the most feared defenders in the entire league for the rest of the decade. On the field, though, 1971 was a step backward. The Raiders sat at 7-1-2 through 10 games before dropping 3 of their final 4 to finish 8-4-2, identical to the year before. In a tighter AFC West that season, that record simply wasn't enough. It was the only year between 1972 and 1977 that Oakland would watch the postseason from home. Jack Tatum's rookie campaign doubled as the start of a new run of dominance for the franchise. Oakland spent the 4th round of the 1972 draft on wide receiver Cliff Branch out of Colorado, a burner who would go on to spend his entire 14-year career in the silver and black and eventually land in the Hall of Fame. The Raiders started slowly, sitting at 4-3-1 through 8 games, before reeling off 6 straight wins to close the year 10-3-1 and reclaim the AFC West title. That set up a playoff date with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the divisional round, a defensive slugfest at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh that stayed scoreless deep into the second half. Ken Stabler, filling in for an injured Daryl LaMonica, gave Oakland a 7-6 lead with a 30-yard scramble late in the 4th quarter. Pittsburgh then faced 4th and 10 from their own 40-yard line, with just 22 seconds left on the clock. What happened next has been argued about for more than 50 years. Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw's deflected pass was scooped up just above the turf by rookie running back Franco Harris, who ran it in for the winning touchdown. Oakland argued the ball had deflected off their own Jack Tatum, which under the rules of the era would have made the catch illegal, since a receiver could not legally catch a pass that had bounced off one of his own teammates. Officials reviewed it, ruled the touchdown stood, and Pittsburgh escaped with a 13-7 win, their first ever playoff victory in franchise history. The play forever became known as the Immaculate Reception, one of the most famous and most disputed moments in the history of American sports. And it was also the beginning of a bitter postseason rivalry between the two franchises, one that would see them collide in the playoffs 4 more times before the decade was over. Wide receiver Fred Biletnikoff earned All-Pro honors that season, and quarterback Daryl LaMonica, running back Marv Hubbard, tight end Raymond Chester, center Jim Otto, guard Gene Upshaw, tackle Art Shell, and Willie Brown all made the Pro Bowl, proof that even in a heartbreaking playoff loss, this was becoming one of the deepest rosters in football. Oakland got a measure of revenge the very next season. The Raiders used the first round of the 1973 draft on Southern Mississippi punter Ray Guy, the first punter in NFL history ever selected in the opening round of a draft, and Guy would spend the rest of the decade proving the pick was worth it. On the field, the Raiders finished 9-4-1, won the AFC West for the 3rd time in 4 seasons, and drew the Steelers again in the divisional round, this time blowing them out 33-14 for their own measure of payback. But Oakland's championship window slammed shut against a different opponent entirely. The Miami Dolphins, fresh off the only perfect season in NFL history the year before, had their 18-game winning streak snapped by the Raiders earlier that same regular season. But Miami still throttled Oakland 27-10 in the AFC Championship Game on their way to a 2nd consecutive Super Bowl title. 1974 was the year Ken Stabler arrived as one of the best quarterbacks in professional football. In his first full season as the starter, Stabler led the NFL with 26 touchdown passes, completed 62.7% of his throws, and was named the league's most valuable player as well as the Associated Press Offensive Player of the Year. Oakland went 12-2, the best record in the NFL that season, and captured the AFC West for the 4th time in 5 years. In the divisional round, the Raiders faced the 2-time defending champion Dolphins once again, and this time, Stabler delivered the signature moment of his career. With Oakland trailing late in the 4th quarter, Stabler was hit as he threw and lobbed a desperate pass into a crowd of Miami defenders near the goal line. Running back Clarence Davis somehow came down with the football through a swarm of hands for the winning touchdown, and the Raiders escaped 28-26 in a game remembered ever since as the Sea of Hands. The win ended Miami's bid for a 3rd straight championship. Once again, though, the road stopped in Pittsburgh. The Steelers, on their way to the first of 4 Super Bowl titles in 6 seasons, beat Oakland 24-13 in the AFC Championship Game, sending the Raiders home empty-handed for the 2nd year running. The Raiders kept knocking. In 1975, Oakland went 11-3, won a fourth consecutive AFC West title, and beat the Cincinnati Bengals 31-28 in the divisional round. It also marked the final season of George Blanda's remarkable 26-year professional career. When he retired, he had played more seasons and appeared in more games than any player in the history of the sport at that point. The 1975 Raiders defense was one of the best of the entire decade, holding opposing quarterbacks to a passer rating of just 37.2 for the season, one of the lowest marks recorded since the merger. For the third straight year, though, the Raiders' season ended against the Steelers. This time in a defensive battle, Pittsburgh won 16-10 on their way to a second straight championship. Oakland had now reached the AFC Championship Game 5 times since the AFL-NFL merger, and had walked away without a title every single time. Around the league, and around Stabler and Madden specifically, a simple, painful storyline had taken hold. Great team, can't win the big one. Everything changed in 1976. Before the season, the Raiders traded 2 future first-round draft picks to the Green Bay Packers for linebacker Ted Hendricks, an unusually tall and versatile pass rusher who instantly upgraded a defense that already featured Jack Tatum and Willie Brown roaming the secondary. Oakland opened the year on fire and finished 13-1. The best regular season record in franchise history at that point, clinching a 6th AFC West title in 7 seasons. Stabler had arguably the finest season of his career, leading the league in completion percentage, yards per attempt, and touchdown passes, and he was named the AFC's Player of the Year for a second time. The Raiders beat the New England Patriots 24-21 in the divisional round, then finally exercised their Pittsburgh Demons, beating the Steelers 24-7 in the AFC Championship Game to reach the Super Bowl for the first time in 9 years. Their opponent was the Minnesota Vikings, themselves winless in 3 previous Super Bowl appearances, and just as desperate to shake a reputation for coming up short on the biggest stage. Played on January 9, 1977, at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, in front of more than 103,000 fans, Super Bowl XI was a rout from the opening quarter. After a scoreless first 15 minutes, Oakland scored on 3 consecutive possessions in the second quarter, an Arrowman field goal followed by a short touchdown pass from Stabler to Dave Casper, and a 1-yard touchdown run from Pete Banaszak, to build a 16-0 halftime lead. The Raiders finished with a then Super Bowl record 429 total yards, including a then record 266 yards on the ground behind the blocking of Hall of Fame linemen Art Shell and Gene Upshaw. Running back Clarence Davis rushed for 137 yards on just 16 carries, Banaszak added a second short touchdown run in the third quarter, and cornerback Willie Brown put the game away for good in the fourth quarter with a 75-yard interception return off Minnesota quarterback Fran Tarkenton for a touchdown. Wide receiver Fred Biletnikoff caught just 4 passes for 79 yards, but 3 of those catches set up short Raiders touchdowns, and he was named the game's most valuable player for it. Minnesota never led at any point and scored twice in garbage time to make the final score look closer than the game actually was. Oakland won 32-14, and John Madden, after 7 seasons of coming up just short, finally had his championship. It was the first Super Bowl title in franchise history. The Raiders returned in 1977 as defending champions and remained one of the best teams in football, finishing 11-3. It wasn't enough to repeat as division winners, though, as the Denver Broncos took the AFC West at 12-2 after splitting their season series with Oakland. As a wild card, the Raiders still reached the postseason for a 7th time in 8 seasons, beating the Baltimore Colts 37-31 in a double overtime thriller in the divisional round, one of the wildest playoff games of the entire decade. But their 5th consecutive trip to the AFC Championship Game ended in a loss to the very team that had beaten them out for the division, as Denver won 20-17, sending the Broncos to their first Super Bowl in franchise history instead. That same season, Oakland set a professional football record that still stands today, attempting 681 rushing plays over the course of the year, led by fullback Mark Van Egen's 1,273 yards and Clarence Davis adding another 787 of his own. The 1978 season brought both tragedy and one of the strangest finishes in NFL history. On August 12th, in a meaningless preseason game against the New England Patriots, Raiders safety Jack Tatum delivered a violent hit on Patriots receiver Darryl Stingley as he stretched for a pass over the middle of the field. Stingley's neck was broken on the play, and he was left paralyzed from the chest down for the rest of his life. It remains one of the most sobering moments in the sport's history and a permanent reminder of the physical toll professional football can take. Weeks later, in the regular season opener, Oakland lost to Denver, and the Raiders needed a win in Week 2 against the San Diego Chargers just to even their record. Trailing 20-14 with 10 seconds left and the ball at the Chargers' 14-yard line, Ken Stabler was about to be sacked when he intentionally fumbled the football forward. Running back Pete Banaszak dove on the loose ball and batted it further toward the goal line, and tight end Dave Casper accidentally kicked it before falling on it in the end zone. Officials ruled it a legal touchdown, and Oakland escaped with a 21-20 win in a play that instantly became known as the Holy Roller. The NFL rewrote its fumble rules the following offseason specifically because of it, so that a play like it could never happen again. Beyond that wild finish, 1978 was a difficult year for the Raiders. Tight end Dave Casper still made his usual impact, leading the team with 62 catches for 852 yards, and fullback Mark Van Egan ran for a team-best 1,080 yards. But the Raiders lost twice to the Seattle Seahawks that season for the first time since 1965, and were swept by Denver as well. Oakland finished 9-7, missed the playoffs for the first time since 1971, and John Madden, worn down after 10 seasons on the sideline, coached his final game for the franchise that December. He retired with a career regular season record of 103 wins, 32 losses, and 7 ties. A winning percentage that remains the highest in NFL history among any coach with at least 100 career victories, and in 10 seasons at the helm, he had never once finished with a losing record. Wide receivers coach Tom Flores was promoted to replace Madden for the 1979 season, becoming the first Hispanic head coach in modern NFL history. The transition season was rocky. The Raiders opened 1-3, climbed back to 6-4, slipped to 6-6 after an upset loss to Kansas City, then rattled off 3 straight wins, including a wild comeback in New Orleans after trailing by 21 points in the third quarter. Oakland arrived at the season finale needing a win over the Seattle Seahawks just to sneak into the playoffs, but Seattle quarterback Jim Zorn threw for more than 300 yards and 2 touchdowns to beat the Raiders 29-24. Oakland finished 9-7 and 4th in the AFC West, its lowest divisional finish since 1964. Closing out the decade on the outside of the playoff picture for a second straight year. Still, the 1979 roster was quietly setting up the next era of Raiders football. Flores was in his first year learning how to run the franchise without Madden beside him, and pieces like linebacker Rod Martin, a 12th-round pick out of USC in the 1977 draft who had been a virtual afterthought on draft day, were beginning to establish themselves as building blocks for what was coming next. Add it all up, and across the entire decade, the Oakland Raiders posted a regular season record of 100 wins, 38 losses, and 6 ties, the second-best mark in the entire NFL behind only the Dallas Cowboys, who finished the decade at 105-39. The Pittsburgh Steelers won 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, more than any other team, but even Pittsburgh finished the decade with a lower regular season winning percentage than Oakland did. Across the decade, the Raiders won 6 AFC West division titles, made the playoffs 7 times, reached the AFC Championship Game 6 times, and won a Super Bowl. They missed the postseason only 3 times in 10 years, and under John Madden specifically, they never once finished a season below 5,500. 11 different players who wore the silver and black at some point during the 1970s eventually made it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Center Jim Otto, cornerback Willie Brown, quarterback kicker George Blanda, wide receiver Fred Biletnikoff, punter Ray Guy, offensive lineman Art Shell and Gene Upshaw, linebacker Ted Hendricks, quarterback Ken Stabler, tight end Dave Casper, and defensive tackle Bob Brown. They were joined in Canton by head coach John Madden and by owner Al Davis, whose simple, relentless motto, "Just win, baby," defined everything the organization stood for, both on the field and off it. The Raiders carried that exact same identity straight into the following decade. Just 4 years after this recap ends, under new head coach Tom Flores, Oakland became the first wildcard team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl, and they'd add a 3rd championship a few years after that, once the franchise had relocated to Los Angeles. But it was the 1970s that built the foundation for all of it. The Hall of Fame core, the identity, the swagger, and the fear that opposing locker rooms felt every single time they saw the silver and black lining up across from them. 10 seasons, 6 division titles, 6 trips to a championship game, and one unforgettable night in Pasadena that finally turned "can't win the big one" into champions of the world. Thank you for watching. And if you like this video, we have another one for you right here.